So last time, we talked all about Isaac Dubos's incredible journey of survival. It was intense. But today we're shifting gears. We're going to look at his children, the very first generation born in America. Their story isn't about escaping a past, it's about building a future, about totally transforming. So let's get into it.
And that's really the big question, isn't it? For any family that starts over in a new place. Once you're safe, what's next? How do you actually build a life? For the Dubos kids, it meant figuring out how to stop being French refugees and start being, well, Carolinians.
Okay, so let's picture this. What was it actually like for these kids growing up? They lived in this little French bubble, the settlement at Jamestown on the Santee River. I mean, it was a super tight-knit community, you know? They were all connected by what their parents had been through, their faith, their language, everything.
And this slide, this just lays it out perfectly. They were living these two completely different lives. At home, life was French. That's where they spoke French, prayed in their Huguenot faith, and heard those harrowing stories about their parents' persecution and escape. But the second they left their little village, bam, the world was English. English was the language of business in Charlestown. It was the language of the law, the language of the entire British colony they lived in.
And there were a lot of them who had to learn to navigate this strange new world. Isaac and Suzanne had 8 kids who made it to adulthood. That's 6 sons and 2 daughters. And having such a big family, well, that was going to become a huge reason they couldn't stay put in that original settlement for long.
So you can see how this generation pretty much had to be bilingual just to function. But then this one single historical event comes along that just hits the fast-forward button on their entire shift from a French identity to an Anglo-American one.
And that event was the Church Act of 1706. Now, on paper, it just says, okay, the Anglican Church is now the official church of South Carolina. Simple enough, right? But for people like the Huguenots who were deeply committed Calvinists, the ripple effects of this law were absolutely massive.
And this is basically the roadmap for what happened next. Now, nobody was telling them they couldn't practice their own religion, but the act created these powerful incentives to, join the club. If you wanted to hold any kind of public office or have full civic rights, you really had to be a member of the Anglican Church. So over time, a lot of Huguenot families started joining the local parish, where, of course, all the services were in English.
And this is the key takeaway. This generation, the Carolina-born, they became this linguistic bridge. They were really the last ones to be truly fluent in both French and English. Think about it. Their kids, who were now going to English-speaking churches and schools, were almost guaranteed to grow up speaking only English. That's a huge, huge shift. But it wasn't just about language and religion. There was another massive force pushing this generation into the mainstream, the simple, powerful need for land. I mean, with 8 kids growing up and looking to start their own families, that original plot of land on the Santee River was just not going to cut it.
And you have to understand, in colonial South Carolina, land was everything. Seriously, everything. It was how you got rich. It determined your social status. You literally couldn't even vote without owning land. And with the whole colony's economy taking off thanks to cash crops like rice and indigo, you needed a lot of land to really make your mark.
And we can actually see this happening right there in the historical records. The oldest son, Isaac II, he's the perfect example. He didn't just wait around to inherit his dad's farm. No, he went out and actively got more land through government grants and by buying it, pushing the family's footprint further inland into a place they called Graven County.
And this is a really important point. They weren't just farmers anymore, growing enough to feed themselves. By getting all this new land, they were transforming themselves into planters. They were building real wealth, and that move secured their family's place in the upper tiers of society for generations to come.
Okay, so they're speaking English, they're acquiring land, they're even joining the official church. But how do we really know that they were accepted? That they were seen as full-fledged members of colonial society?
Well, the proof, as they say, is in the pudding, or, in this case, the public records. Suddenly, you start seeing the Dubos sons showing up on jury duty lists. You see their names on the rosters for the local militia. These are the things that established citizens did. They weren't being called French refugees anymore. And then, the biggest step of all, they start marrying into prominent English families, literally weaving their DNA into the fabric of the colony.
And man, this quote just nails it. Think about that for a second. In one single generation, they went from being the kids of desperate refugees to being the founders of an American family. It's just an incredible transformation.
What this generation pulled off was nothing short of amazing. They took the legacy of their parents' survival, their faith, their resilience, and they didn't just copy it, they transformed it. They turned it into a rock-solid economic and social foundation, right here in American soil.
So it really leaves you with this big thought, right? How does that happen? How does the intense struggle of one generation become the solid ground that the next generation gets to build on? It's a pattern you see over and over in history, and it's a powerful reminder of all the quiet sacrifices that truly shape the future.